you're looking to get fitted furniture made, you'll quickly realise you'll get wildly varying quotes from different providers, ranging from one-man band self-employed joiners who will make everything on site and it will have to be painted separately afterwards, up to options where everything is pre-finished and you may be paying VAT for a larger company, and the whole service and process, the whole setup may be quite different. We as a company at Freebird, we sit in the middle towards the higher end in that we are not a national company. We offer a personal service. We're a family run company, but we offer a very high quality finish, and we are a limited company and we're VAT registered. So I want to compare in this video this unit which we made at a cost of £5,190 including VAT to a unit that was already in the same customer's house, which was made at a cost of around about £1,800 plus about £250 for painting. So they're similar in size, but as you've seen, very different in price. And note that that other one does actually have some spotlights in it as well. So what is the difference? Why would you pay more? Let's start with the choice of material. Now, both of these projects were made using MDF, but MDF can vary massively, both in the type that is used and in how it is prepared. So this MDF, I can't be sure what brand it is, but what I can be sure of is that it hasn't been carefully prepared for painting. This is a cut edge with probably no sanding, which has then been painted. So you get this very textured effect. And this is, by the way, a hand painting process. So if we compare that now directly to the other project, this MDF is Medite brand, and it's a moisture resistant type of MDF, which means it's denser, it's harder than your typical MDF that you'll find off the shelf, and it takes a finish better. So that's another important point, is whether the company you're using is workshop based or entirely site based. The former type of company will have much higher overheads, which will be another reason for the higher price. The other company will in many ways be more flexible and responsive and just get the job done on site, but they can't achieve the same level of finish, and even at the lower level of finish they will be in your house inconveniencing you for a little bit longer. So this project was done over about a week. The project in the other room was fully fitted within 3 days because it had been pre-made and painted off-site. That also means that less dust is being produced when things are produced off-site. It also means that more precision can be achieved with the doors being test-fitted, pre-fitted prior to painting, which then allows a very good level of finish on the doors themselves. So let's move on then to the construction methods. If we look at how the doors were made by a joiner working on site, he will be limited in terms of space and time and may go for an easier method of construction, but that might have some downsides. So these doors here were made using a 6mm MDF backer panel. So the door is a full sheet, and then glued onto that we've got 9mm strips, and you can see the seam there. You can also see that not a great deal of care has been taken in finishing the mitered moulding that has been put in. Now, a problem with that method is that the door, well, for one thing, it's quite thin and it's inherently unstable because there's a glue line which is off center on the door. So we have quite a poor fit where you can see that door over time has bowed in. Now the method that we use, the methods do vary, but the method we most often use now is that we have the doors manufactured from a solid sheet. So it does have a separate thinner panel, but the bulk of the door is full thickness, 18mm. We also sometimes do them at 22mm. This one has a 6mm panel fitted very tightly into a rebate, and more care has been taken over the finish of the mitres there, and you have no visible joints because it is a solid piece. We do also sometimes make the doors as 5-piece doors, which means you have what are called stiles, rails, which make up that square frame, and then a panel in a groove, and some sort of a joint where the rails and stiles meet. That can also give a good result, but that needs time and space to clamp up while the joints dry. So that's a method that's less likely to be used by a joiner cutting, fitting everything on site. Now I do want to make it clear that I'm not trying to make a comparison in stark terms of better or worse, because you choose work to suit your budget. I'm just trying to help people make an informed choice about what you're likely to get for a certain budget. Now, keeping in mind this idea of not being better or worse, some people would say that a traditional, what's called a butt hinge, where you can visibly see, this is called the knuckle of the hinge, some people would consider that to be a higher quality look and fit. Others would consider the modern concealed hinge to be a higher quality. In that case, you don't get a visible hinge knuckle, but inside you have this kind of hinge, which I'm 99% sure you'll find a variation of in your kitchen. Now, the hinge that's fitted on the other project in the other room is actually sort of an in-between in that it's not a traditional butt hinge, it's called a non-mortise hinge. So the leaves of the hinge interlock with each other, which means that the hinge itself is quite thin, which means that it doesn't have to be chopped in with the joiner's skill. It doesn't have to be chopped into a little cutout in the edge of the door, which a traditional butt hinge would need to have done. So that it's a slightly cheaper hinge. You could argue that it's a bit less robust, but the main issue with this kind of hinge used in this material of MDF is that it requires screws to be driven into the edge grain of the door. Now, MDF is very poorly suited to a screw driving into those compressed layers. It's like lots of layers that make that up. So as you can see, that has split, which is not a very high quality or long-lasting way of doing it. The benefit of the concealed hinge, also known as a cup hinge, when you're using MDF, is that the weight of the hinge, the weight of the door I should say, is borne onto the hinge by the cup. So that round bit with the sort of rectangular wings coming off it actually goes into a 35mm diameter drilled hole, and the weight of the door is transferred to the hinge that way. These screws mainly just serve to hold that cup in place, so you have no splitting issues in the MDF because it's designed for the structure of the MDF. It's designed to work well, because if you drive a screw into the face of MDF, it will grab well with no splitting issues. Another benefit of the modern style of concealed hinge is that they now have integrated soft close. So there's a mechanism that can be built into the hinge. On these ones, it's identifiable with the grey plastic parts there. And that works with the hinge to both self-close and soft close. So these hinges are called sprung hinges because they have a spring in the arm which pulls the door closed, but the soft close variation also has a damper which softens its movement to avoid slamming. That also means that they don't need a catch, which is another bit of hardware which some may consider unsightly. Now, of course, you'll be thinking high-end furniture shouldn't be MDF. There's a lot of great benefits to spending even more on solid wood, but it is just worth bearing in mind that MDF, used properly, as we've seen here, does have a lot of specific advantages. So it is very flat and stable. It is the best material for the sort of perfectly flat sprayed finish that you can achieve, and it's not prone to shrinking and warping. So solid woods can be a lot more prone to that, and you may, for example, in a solid wood door, find that you get seams opening up because this rail has ever so slightly shrunk, whereas the shrinkage along the length of the grain of that piece is not so much. So those are the sorts of issues that can come about with solid wood. So if what you're looking for is a white painted finish, then MDF is particularly well suited to it. So it's not as simple as MDF is for cheaper work and solid wood is for more expensive work. It's about suiting the material to the desired look that you're aiming for. MDF is also going to be a lot more stable over a wider expanse, and it would be, for example, very inappropriate to make that big back panel out of a solid wood, because you would without a doubt get it cracking, and you'd also be pouring money into something where it is distinctly less suited. So I hope that makes that question clear. The other aspects of what you might expect to get for your money from different providers are things like promptness and communication, so arriving when people say they will. A lot of this is down to systems and whether there's administrative support in the company, which again has its costs. Another important aspect that you may get more of from the sort of mid to high end of the market of the providers is the level of design. So we, for example, design a project like this entirely in 3D on 3D CAD, and we send it back and forth for review with the customer. In fact, we do the initial design in front of the customer, sat with them at the laptop, and we go into all the details so that you can see exactly how it's going to go together, how it's going to meet the wall, how certain joints are resolved. So something like this was quite complex in terms of the set forward and the set up. You may have less certainty with someone who in some cases may just work off a rough idea or may give you sketches, but it may not be fully resolved. Very likely not fully resolved even in the mind of the maker until he comes to make. Again, that may suit your budget and that may suit your approach, because if you find someone that you trust and that's well reviewed, you may be happy to say, well, I want something roughly like this. You may have just seen an image and they say, okay, it's going to be about this much, and they just come and make it. So it depends, I suppose it depends partly on your personality and what you're expecting from that person. There are very different ways of approaching things. So if you look at these units, they've been made undersize and set within the space, and then a filler has just been put in to fill the gap, which is fine, and I don't think it looks bad. A different approach is a slightly more integrated fitted unit where the filler is effectively the frame of the door, and there's not a separate step and a separate setback, and the countertop is scribed, butted right up against the wall itself. So these are just different approaches to be aware of and to think about. Another detail, which is to do with the level of planning and design, is that we've taken care to precisely match the cornice at the top by recommending a subcontract cornice specialist who've made it to fit out of plaster. In this case, the cornice has not been perfectly matched, but instead a wood profile has been butted up to the top. So I think just finally onto the painting, just to look at that again. This also could vary, and it may be that you want to find a small scale local provider, but you just really want to grill them about the care that's going to be taken over the painting. So it would be possible to get a better final finish even by making and fitting in your house if more care had been taken to thoroughly sand that MDF edge. There are limits though to the quality of the finish, because if it's a non-moisture resistant MDF, it may never get such a fine finish, and also if it's hand painted, there will always be the brush marks and the texture. So if we just compare that again to the close-up on the finish on the other unit, that will help you to see the difference. Now the paint that we use is a water-based paint. It's spray applied in the workshop, but being water-based, it can also be brush applied. So it's sort of like the best of both worlds really, and we find that it does flatten off very well. So if you did need to touch up, you'd be able to do that. That's compared to some spray finishes which are chemical based and can't really be touched up from a pot, because there may be a special mix that cures as soon as it's mixed and has to be applied by spray. Well, I hope that's a helpful comparison. Do feel free to ask me any questions in the comments below. If there's anything I haven't covered about our methods or other methods in the market, then I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. And do subscribe to the channel if you're interested in fitted furniture, either as someone that wants to commission it or make it as a DIYer, or you're a professional in this industry. This channel is full of tips about how to make it and about how the business side of things is run. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.